You don't get to hate it. You weren't there. Her voice didn't rise. She didn't cry. But the way Sheila said it stripped everything off his chest in seconds. The words hit harder than a punch. Zev hadn't expected to see her. He hadn't expected anything, really. He was half asleep, dragging his carry-on through the terminal, thinking about his meetings in Denver, until he smelled it. A scent too familiar to ignore. Honeyed jasmine. Her scent. Not strong, not loud, just like always. Sheila wore it like a signature. Clean, calm, unmistakable. His steps slowed. His eyes scanned the crowd. Gate 14 blinked above him in blue lights. Wrong gate. Wrong terminal. But not the wrong moment. She stood across the lounge, bending down to pick up a small red toy. Her dress swayed gently, the same soft cream color she used to love. A little boy tugged at her arm. A girl leaned against her knee. Their hair thick and curly, their eyes full of questions, their hands small but holding tight. One child had Zev's eyebrows. The other had Sheila's smile. His chest tightened. He hadn't seen her since Florence. The missed proposal. The flight he never boarded. The call about his father's collapse had changed everything. He'd messaged her. She never replied. He assumed she'd moved on. He didn't expect to see her like this. Not today. Not ever. Sheila, he muttered, half breath, half prayer. She turned. Her almond eyes locked onto him. Sharp. Controlled. Zev. Her tone sliced right through the years between them. They didn't hug. They didn't smile. They just stared. One heartbeat after another. 20 minutes later, they sat across from each other in the airport lounge. Her children slept beside her. Zev leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I never got on that plane, he whispered. I waited. For hours, she said flatly. Then days. I sent a message. I thought you knew. I thought you abandoned me. The weight settled between them. She reached down, adjusting a tiny sock on her son's foot. Her hand shook, barely. They're mine? He asked. She didn't look up. Their names are Malachi and Leylan. You don't get to ask more than that. Zev exhaled slowly. I don't need a test. I know what's mine. She finally turned to him. You don't get to hate what I went through, she said, her voice trembling. You weren't there. Comment below if you've ever missed your moment and wanted it back. Your engagement helps YouTube show this story to others. Zev Lane had flown hundreds of times. Red eyes to Seattle, quick hops to Chicago, marathon flights to London. He always prided himself on knowing his gates, his terminals, his routine. But today, for some reason, maybe because of the client calls, maybe because of the headache that had been pounding since morning, he walked into the wrong part of Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. He glanced down at his boarding pass. Gate 27, B, but he was standing at gate 14. He blinked at the numbers. Confused. He must have passed the tram platform without noticing. Typical. He'd been glued to his phone, skimming through last-minute notes for the Denver pitch. It didn't matter. He still had time. He turned around, ready to head back toward the main corridor. But he didn't move. Something pulled him to stay still. A smell. Zev turned his head slightly. Subtle, soft, familiar. Honeyed jasmine. His feet refused to move. It wasn't perfume from a duty-free stand. It wasn't air freshener or coffee or airport soap. It was her. He inhaled again. Slower this time. The scent curled in the air. Faint, but perfect. He hadn't smelled it in 3 years, but every cell in his body remembered. That perfume wasn't just an accessory. It was a memory, a season, a moment in Florence on a balcony with a woman whose laugh made the sky feel closer. He looked around. The terminal bustled with travelers. A family tried to untangle headphone wires. A businessman typed frantically on a laptop. Children chased each other near the seating area. And then, about 20 feet away, by a row of chairs, a woman bent down to pick something off the floor. Cream-colored dress. Coils of hair bouncing down her back. The scent stronger now. Zev's fingers loosened around his boarding pass. No, it couldn't be. He took one step closer. The buzz of the airport faded. He knew that walk, that posture, the way she gently pushed her hair out of her face when adjusting her dress. It was her, Sheila. His heart stuttered. A sharp pulse hit his throat. The last time he saw her, she was wearing a scarf and waiting at the Ponte Vecchio, phone in hand, looking in every direction except the one that mattered. He hadn't called. He hadn't come. The emergency had pulled him back to New York, and life hadn't slowed down since. He swallowed hard. The years dropped away. He wasn't in gate 14 anymore. He was standing in front of his biggest mistake. It was never her face that first caught his attention. It was always something else. The smell of honey and jasmine, the rustle of her curls when she turned her head, the gentle shift of her weight when she stood too long. And now, in this crowded terminal, none of those things had changed. Zev didn't see her first. He felt her. He was still standing frozen, unsure whether to move or turn back. But the scent held him there. The same perfume he once gifted her in Florence years ago. She used to joke it made her feel like herself, clean, warm, and powerful. He remembered how he'd lean in every chance he got, not because of the perfume, but because she wore it like a mood, like it gave her confidence. That same confidence floated through the air now. Even before he saw her, Zev knew she was near. The space around him shifted. His ears still heard the hum of announcements, the beep of carts backing up, the shuffle of luggage wheels. But all of it became distant, as if the terminal suddenly blurred and only that scent remained sharp. He turned slowly, and his stomach dropped. There she was. Her back was to him, but he knew every curve of her. The way her dress cinched at the waist, the slope of her shoulders, the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear even when it didn't fall. She knelt on the ground, retrieving a toy, a red plastic truck. And beside her, 2 children. Zev's eyes narrowed slightly. A little girl leaned against her side, head buried into the folds of her dress. A little boy gripped her wrist, standing protectively, possessively, both with deep curls, both with eyes he couldn't yet see. He didn't need to see them. His breath hitched. There was something about the way the boy stood, posture stiff, gaze locked forward, that felt like looking into a mirror from years ago. Zev had that same stance in childhood photos, arms close to his body, chin tilted slightly in defiance. That expression that said, "Don't come closer unless you mean it." And the girl, she had Sheila's softness, the quiet clinginess. She barely moved, as if this woman beside her was her entire world. His mind began to race. His heart pounded. This wasn't coincidence. It wasn't a dream. It was real. Sheila was here. And she had twins. He didn't realize he was still holding his boarding pass until it dropped to the floor. He stepped forward once, twice. "Sheila," he called out, barely above a whisper. She froze. Then, slowly, she stood. Her body turned, stiff and cautious. She faced him. Their eyes met. No smiles, no tears, just stillness. "Zev," she said, her voice cracking at the edges. 3 years collapsed into a single moment. Zev had seen models on runways, actresses on red carpets, faces in magazines that people swore were flawless. But nothing ever measured up to the way Sheila looked right now. Not because of her dress, though it floated around her like light. Not because of makeup, she wore none. Her beauty was quiet, rooted, earned, the kind that came from surviving, not styling. Her hair had changed a little, still thick and coiled, but shorter now, framed her face in soft layered curls. Her skin glowed, even under the harsh lights. Not glossy, just clean. Her eyes, almond-shaped and familiar, didn't flinch when they met his. She stood still, steady, but Zev noticed her left hand grip the strap of her diaper bag, just a little tighter than needed. She looked like a woman who had rebuilt herself. And the twins. Zev's gaze dropped to the children now hiding behind her legs, peeking up at him with wide, questioning eyes. The girl stood closer to Sheila's left side. Her dress had little yellow sunflowers on it. Her fingers curled into her mother's hem, holding on like she was trying not to float away. Her hair was tied up in 2 puffs, and her dimple, Sheila's dimple, showed when she blinked at him shyly. She had a slightly crooked front tooth and wore mismatched socks. The boy stood to her right, stockier. His hand clenched the toy truck. His expression was all skepticism, like he was already trying to size Zev up. His curls were tighter, shorter. He had a small scar above one eyebrow and a smudge of something chocolatey near his mouth. But the part that froze Zev was his eyes. They were his, Exactly. The same light hazel shade that always surprised people when they looked at him too closely. The same long lashes that made his mother joke he'd been born wearing mascara. Zev's chest tightened. His lungs barely remembered how to function. The boy shifted closer to Sheila. Protective. His gaze never left Zev's face. "They're beautiful," Zev murmured. He didn't know if he said it aloud or just in his head. Didn't matter. The truth of it hit him hard. He couldn't stop staring. They were real. They were his. And somehow he hadn't known until now. The girl tugged at Sheila's arm. "Mama, who's that man?" Zev's throat closed. Sheila crouched down between them. She placed a hand gently on both their backs. "He's someone from Mama's past," she said calmly. "That's all for now." The boy kept staring. Quiet. Studying. The girl blinked, then smiled briefly before turning to play with her toy. Zev took a half step forward, but Sheila straightened and gave him a look. "Not now. Not here." He nodded once. He didn't deserve more than that. The lounge was quieter than the rest of the terminal. Plush chairs, charging ports, muted TVs playing business news. Zev sat across from Sheila, elbows on his knees, fingers laced, trying to steady his breath. He hadn't asked her to sit with him. She'd walked in behind him, pushing a small stroller with one hand, her children trailing close. Silent, watchful. Now, 20 minutes later, they were alone in the corner of the lounge. The twins curled up beside her, asleep, one on each side, heads on her thighs like anchors. Zev couldn't stop looking at them. But more than that, he couldn't stop stealing glances at her. She sat straight, shoulders back, one hand stroking Leilon's curls, the other resting over Malachi's spine. A mother's rhythm. Calm. Unshaken. Zev cleared his throat. "I thought you were in Italy," he said finally. She looked at him, just a glance. "I was." He hesitated. I thought you lived there now." "I did." For a while. She shifted, adjusting the weight of her daughter. "But life happens. People move." He nodded, biting the inside of his cheek. Silence again. He reached for a bottle of water on the table and took a sip, only to set it down untouched. "I didn't board the flight," he said quietly. Sheila blinked. He continued. "Back then, in Florence, I was on my way to meet you when I got the call about my dad. He collapsed. Emergency surgery. I turned around, sent a message. A few, actually. But you never replied." Her face didn't change much, but her jaw tightened. "I waited," she said, voice low. "For hours. I sat in that cafe, thinking you'd walk in any minute. Then I walked the river, checked the hotel again. Still nothing." Zev's stomach churned. "I should have called again. I thought you ghosted me, Zev," she cut in, still calm. "I thought maybe you changed your mind and didn't have the guts to say it." "I didn't," he whispered. "I was going to propose." She looked at him sharply now. "Don't say that. It's true. It doesn't matter anymore." He leaned back, hands resting on his thighs. "I thought you moved on." She looked down at Malachi, brushing a strand of hair off his forehead. "I thought you disappeared." His eyes followed her hand. They're mine?" A long pause. Sheila kept her gaze on her son. "Their names are Malachi and Leilon." He waited. "You don't get to ask more than that," she said flatly. Zev nodded once. The hurt in her voice was louder than her words. He deserved every bit of it. Still, his eyes stayed on the boy. His eyes, his stubborn mouth, even the way he crossed his ankles in sleep. It all screamed blood. "I don't need proof," Zev said, barely audible. "I know what I see." Sheila didn't respond, but something behind her eyes flickered. Zev hadn't realized how tightly he was holding his breath until she spoke their names out loud. Malachi and Leilon. He whispered them back. Malachi, Leilon. The names landed on his tongue like prayers he wasn't sure he had the right to speak. They sounded like poems, whole and heavy. Sheila didn't look up, but he could see the way her fingers gripped the edge of the stroller handle, steadying herself. "Why those names?" he asked gently, afraid to push too far but needing to know. She sighed. "Malachi means messenger, because he came first, loud, fists clenched, like he had something to say the minute he was born." She paused. "Leilon means heavenly flower." She was quiet, breathing slow. She didn't cry until I held her. Zev blinked hard. "They were born in Italy?" She nodded. He shifted forward. You did it alone? Sheila finally looked at him. Yes. Zev pressed his lips together. No words could touch that. Not now. Not yet. He studied the children again, repeating their names silently to himself. Malachi, his son, with his eyebrows and serious face. Leilan, his daughter, with Sheila's smile and softness. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. They're beautiful, he said again, voice low. You gave them beautiful names. You gave them everything. No, she replied. I gave them what I could. Zev's heart dropped. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't know how to reach you. I called. I texted. Nothing went through. I didn't have your new number or address. I moved back to New York. I found that out too late, she said, her voice strained. By then, I'd already been pregnant for months, alone. Zev felt it in his gut. She crossed her arms. And what was I supposed to say? Hey, surprise. You missed the flight and also got me pregnant? Zev winced. I wanted to tell you, she added. I wrote letters. I kept thinking maybe one day I'd see your name online. Something, anything. He nodded slowly. You could have found me. Don't, she said sharply. You could have looked too. You didn't. He dropped his head. She sat straighter. This wasn't about revenge. I wasn't hiding them to punish you. I was protecting them. He looked up. She softened, just slightly. They're good kids, and they've only known one world. Mine. I'm not ready to let anyone rewrite that. Zev's eyes fell back on the twins. He tried to memorize every detail, every eyelash, every scar, every soft rise and fall of their breathing. I don't want to rewrite anything, he said. I just want to be part of it. She didn't respond. He didn't expect her to. The names stayed in his chest like anchors. Malachi, Leilan. He whispered them again, like they belonged to something sacred. Because they did. Zev looked at her. Not past her. Not through her. Just at her. And for the first time in years, Sheila let him. You look tired, he said quietly. She chuckled without smiling. You try raising 2 toddlers with no help. I didn't know, he said. I would have. You would have what? She cut in. Flown back. Paid child support. Showed up to one birthday party and disappeared again. Zev flinched. That's not fair. No, what wasn't fair, she replied, her voice controlled, was holding my stomach alone in a hospital room, wondering why the man who promised me forever didn't even send a message. I sent one, Sheila. Then show me proof, she snapped. Where is it? The screenshot? The call record? The email? Anything? Zev stayed quiet. Her eyes narrowed. That's what I thought. He swallowed. I was scared. After everything with my dad, I didn't know how to come back to you and explain why I left. I thought, maybe it was too late. You thought wrong. He nodded slowly. I know. She adjusted Leilan's head gently as her daughter stirred, then looked at Zev again. Why now? She asked. Why show up at this gate, this terminal, this moment? I didn't mean to, he admitted. It was an accident. I wasn't supposed to be here, but here you are. Zev exhaled. Yeah. Here I am. Her shoulders tensed. You don't get to show up now and expect to be welcomed. I don't expect anything, he said, voice low. I just want to understand what I missed, what I could have been. Sheila blinked slowly, as if trying not to cry. You missed their first words, their first steps, fevers, nightmares, laughs. I know. You missed me screaming into a pillow when I couldn't afford diapers. You missed Malachi crying for hours because he didn't understand why he had no dad on Father's Day. You missed Leilan asking me if she was supposed to have a daddy or not. Zev's eyes filled. Sheila didn't let up. You missed everything, so no, you don't get to sit here and look sad. I'm not sad, he whispered. I'm ashamed. That slowed her. She looked down at her kids again. Zev leaned forward. I can't undo any of it, but I'm here. And if you'll let me, I'll sit in every hard place you've ever had to sit alone. She watched him carefully. I don't need promises, Zev. I'm not offering them, he said. I'm offering presents. She studied his face, then her kids. We'll talk, she finally said. But not now. They're waking up. He nodded once, grateful. Malachi, she whispered, brushing the boy's cheek. Wake up, baby. The boy stirred. Leilan's eyes fluttered open too. Sheila stood slowly. Zev stood too, but kept his distance. Malachi yawned and reached for his mother's hand. Leylan rubbed her eyes. Neither of them looked at Zev. Not yet. Sheila glanced back at him. "This is their world," she said softly. "Step lightly." Zev nodded again and watched them walk away. The lounge remained quiet, but the tension between them filled every corner. Zev sat forward, forearms on his knees again. Sheila leaned back in her chair with the children asleep beside her, but her posture was alert, sharp. Her gaze never lingered too long on him, like every second of eye contact was more than she could offer. He cleared his throat. "Sheila." "No," she said, firm. "Don't start like that." He blinked. She continued, her tone flat. "Don't say my name like it's still yours to say." Zev swallowed. "Okay." A beat passed. "You want to talk?" she said. Then, "Talk." He nodded, suddenly unsure where to begin. The last time they were in a room together, they'd been planning a future. Now, they sat separated by years and silence. "I didn't know you were here," he said. "No kidding. I wasn't supposed to be at gate 14. Then go back to your gate." Her words landed like darts, but Zev didn't move. "I can't," he said. "Not now." She raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. He stared at his hands. "I didn't come here looking for you, Sheila. But you found me." "Yeah." Silence. The twins stirred slightly beside her. She adjusted Leylan's head and Malachi's arm with practiced care. Zev watched her hands. "You're good at that." She didn't respond. "How long have you been back in the States?" he asked. She glanced at him. "A while." "You didn't—" "No, I didn't try to find you." Zev exhaled through his nose. "I thought about it," she added. "But what was I supposed to say?" "Hey, the man who disappeared is a father now? You'd already chosen your silence." "I didn't want to beg for your presence." Her words landed heavy. Zev looked away for a moment, then back at her. "You think I meant to leave you like that?" "I think you did leave." He paused. "What would you have done if you were in my shoes?" She gave him a dry look. "I wouldn't have vanished." His face tightened. "I'm not here to fight," he said quietly. "I'm not here to forgive." The space between them crackled. Not loud, not dramatic, just full of words that had waited too long. He studied her face. She hadn't aged much, but there was something more settled in her now. Not peace. Not quite. Just strength. She wasn't waiting for an apology. She wasn't even expecting an explanation. Still, he owed her both. And this time, he wouldn't leave anything unsaid. Zev stared at the floor for a long second, then leaned back in the chair and finally met her eyes. "I never meant to disappear, Sheila," he said quietly. "I was going to propose to you that day." She flinched, just barely. "I had the ring," he continued. "Box in my carry-on. We had that dinner reservation by the river, remember? I was going to ask you right after dessert." He let the words hang, waiting for a reaction. She didn't blink. "My phone buzzed as I was heading out. It was my mom. I almost didn't pick up," he admitted, rubbing his face. "But I did." She was panicking. My dad had collapsed at the house. Stroke. They rushed him to surgery. Still nothing from her. No tears. Just a hard stare. I got in a cab, changed my flight, tried to call you. I swear I texted. I sent 3 messages before I hit the tram to the next terminal. Then I boarded, landed in New York and went straight to the hospital. Sheila's expression didn't change. "He was in ICU for 6 days, Zev added. "Woke up on the 7th, couldn't talk, could barely move. I stayed at the hospital nearly 2 weeks straight, barely showered, slept on the chairs." He paused. "I figured once I got him stable, I'd go back to Florence. Or at least call you properly." She raised an eyebrow. "But you didn't." He looked down. "No, I didn't." "Why not?" Zev hesitated. "Because when I tried again, your number didn't go through. The email bounced. The hotel said you'd checked out." Sheila crossed her arms. "So, you stopped trying. I didn't know where you were. You knew I lived in Rome." "Yes, but—" He stopped, realizing the excuse would sound hollow even before he finished. She filled in the silence. "But the man who once memorized my flight schedule, my perfume brand, and the way I liked my coffee, couldn't find a way to call me." Zev winced. "I messed up." "No," she replied. You gave up. His voice dropped. I didn't give up. I got scared. Her head tilted, eyes narrowing. I thought maybe I'd lost you, that maybe you thought I ran off. And instead of correcting that, you chose to believe it. Zev let that one sit. He had no defense. Sheila took a breath and looked down at her children. I waited for you, Zev. You said you'd meet me at the cafe. I waited with my phone in my hand, checking it every few seconds like a fool. Zev's chest ached. I thought you'd died, she said, her voice brittle. Or worse, that I didn't matter anymore. His heart twisted. You always mattered. You still do. Her jaw clenched. That's not enough, she said flatly. And he knew she was right. I never got a single message, Sheila said, her voice firm. No missed calls, no texts, nothing. Zev leaned forward. I sent them. Then they didn't reach me. And if they didn't exist. He didn't argue. She paused, brushing a curl away from Leilan's cheek. Her hands were steady, but her tone was different now, slower, almost deliberate. The kind of calm that came from telling a story too many times in your head. I was waiting at the cafe, she said. The one across from the Ponte Vecchio. I got there early, like always. I wore the dress you liked, the green one with the sleeves. I remember looking at every man who walked by, wondering if he was you. Zev swallowed, his throat dry. I kept checking my phone. Signal was fine, battery full. Nothing came. She looked at him now, really looked. I thought maybe you were running late, or maybe you'd stopped to buy something stupid and sweet like that keychain you got me in Barcelona. But hours passed, and no, Zev. His voice came out small. I was on a plane. She nodded, and I was alone. She looked away again. I waited until the sun dipped behind the buildings, she continued. Then I walked to the river, sat by the wall, just sat. People were playing music. Tourists were laughing. I was waiting for a man who promised me everything. Zev blinked back the sting in his eyes. I went back to the hotel, she said. Checked with the front desk. Asked if you'd left a note. Nothing. I didn't have time to leave anything, he said, ashamed. She nodded. I know that now. But then, I didn't even know if you were alive. Zev's voice cracked. I should have found a way. You didn't, she replied flatly. You disappeared. And the next morning, I checked out. I went back to Rome, and I cried for a week. He opened his mouth, but she stopped him. I know you had a crisis, she said. I'm not saying your father didn't matter, but I mattered too. And if I didn't, you could have just said so. You always mattered. You didn't act like it. Her tone wasn't angry anymore. It was matter of fact, which hurt worse. I tried to move on, she said. I deleted your number so I wouldn't be tempted to call, blocked your email, burned the notes you left in my suitcase. Zev looked down. All I had left, she added, was the perfume bottle, the one you bought in Florence. He looked up at that. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away, she said, even when I hated what it reminded me of. Zev nodded slowly. I still wear it, she admitted, not because of you, but because it reminds me of who I was before I had to survive without you. Zev's chest ached again, and this time, he didn't try to speak. Sheila shifted in her seat, the memory already pressing against her chest before the words even left her mouth. I was 2 weeks late when I left Florence, she said. Zev's eyes widened, but she didn't let him speak. I thought it was stress, she continued. Jet lag, emotions, whatever. But back in Rome, nothing changed. I bought a test in secret, used it in the apartment bathroom with the water running so my roommate wouldn't hear me cry. Zev's mouth parted, but again, he stayed silent. When it turned positive, I sat on the bathroom floor for over an hour. I kept looking at it like it was lying to me, like maybe if I blinked hard enough, it would change. She let out a humorless laugh, but it didn't. She brushed a hand across Leilan's cheek and tucked a loose braid behind her ear. I didn't have insurance, no partner, no plan, just a temp teaching contract in a studio apartment with no hot water half the week. Zev's heart dropped further with every word. I went to the clinic alone, got the ultrasound alone, heard 2 heartbeats alone. Her voice cracked slightly, but she didn't stop. The nurse smiled like it was good news. I didn't even smile back. I just nodded, and then I cried in the bathroom for the second time in a week. Zev reached for the water bottle again, but didn't drink. He just held it, hands trembling slightly. She looked at him now. You know what the worst part was? He shook his head slowly, telling myself you'd never know. That I would carry your children and raise them and you'd keep living like we never happened. Zev leaned forward. I would have been there if I'd known. I believe you, she said softly. But believing that didn't help when I was holding my belly at night, wondering how I'd get through 9 months alone. Zev's throat closed. I got sick during month 4, couldn't eat, kept losing weight. The doctor said one of the babies was measuring smaller and I panicked. Her hands trembled now as she remembered. I called your old number. I tried, but it went straight to voicemail. Zev whispered, I changed phones. Yeah, she said. I figured. She pulled the blanket tighter around Malachi. I found a small place in Naples, cheaper rent. I took on extra tutoring, started learning how to stretch rice into 3 meals. Zev blinked back tears. I used to count diapers before bed, she added. Had to choose between wipes or medicine more than once. Sheila. I broke, Zev, she said, her voice hollow. Not all at once, just slowly, quietly, over time. I broke and no one saw. Zev looked at her, fully now. The woman in front of him wasn't just strong, she was rebuilt, and he'd missed every moment that made her this version of herself. Zev had always thought he understood pain. He'd watched his father lose speech after the stroke, sat beside him through months of therapy, managed his business with one hand and family grief with the other, but nothing had prepared him for what Sheila just told him. He sat frozen, her words swirling in his head like echoes that wouldn't stop. Naples, no insurance, weight loss, 2 heartbeats, and no one to hold her hand. He wanted to speak, but shame held his mouth shut. She didn't need comfort. She needed truth, and he owed her that. I failed you, he finally said. She didn't nod, didn't speak, but she didn't deny it either. I left you alone with everything, he added. Not by choice, but still. I wasn't there. She glanced down at Leilon again, who shifted in her lap with a tiny sigh. You weren't, she said, voice even, and that doesn't get erased because you showed up today. Zev looked down at his hands. I know. He had thought about her often over the years. On birthdays, on quiet nights, even when he tried to date again, tried to forget. But those memories were filtered, romanticized. They never included this version of her, this woman who had cried quietly in bathrooms, who had rationed diapers, who had raised his children in cities he never knew she moved to. How did you do it? He asked, his voice breaking. She looked at him, eyes tired. 1 hour at a time. He nodded slowly. Zev had given speeches in boardrooms. He'd negotiated deals worth millions. But now, sitting across from her, he had nothing left to offer but guilt. I thought I was the one who suffered, he said softly, missing you, wondering what happened. But hearing this, he stopped. It's different when you know, she finished for him. He nodded again. I see Malachi's eyes, he said. They look like mine. They squint when he's mad. Just like you did. Zev smiled faintly. I used to think no one noticed that. I noticed everything, she said, and then I had to stop. Because it hurt too much. He let that land. You went through so much without me, he whispered. And I got through it, she replied. That's the part you don't get to skip. He looked at her, really looked. She wasn't trying to make him feel bad. She was making him see. This wasn't about punishment. It was about truth. A truth he hadn't earned until now. I'm sorry, he said. She didn't respond. I know it doesn't fix anything, he added. But I need to say it. Still, she said nothing. But her fingers slowed in Leilon's curls. And Zev sat with that silence, not as rejection, but as the beginning of something harder. Understanding. The silence between them grew thicker. Zev stayed still, eyes fixed on the carpet pattern beneath his feet. He didn't reach for her, didn't plead. He knew better now. Sheila leaned back against the chair, her fingers now tracing soft circles on Leilon's shoulder. Malachi stirred slightly and shifted closer to his mother's side, one small hand slipping beneath her arm. Zev glanced at them. They're safe with you, he said, voice low. They always have been. I want to be part of their lives. Sheila's gaze lifted to meet his. It wasn't angry. It wasn't bitter. It was guarded. I'm not saying no, she said, but I'm not saying yes either. I understand. She nodded, but only a little. You showing up doesn't undo what they've lived through. I know. They don't know you. They know me. They know bedtime stories and cracked window panes and oatmeal for dinner when rent was due. I'm not trying to take any of that away. You can't take it away, she replied sharply. It's part of their story now. And mine. Zev folded his hands together, interlocking his fingers until his knuckles turned white. So what happens now? Sheila exhaled. Now, you give me space. He nodded slowly. You don't come barging into their world because you suddenly remembered how to love, she continued. You don't try to erase my parenting or fast forward your guilt into fatherhood. I'm not trying to. She held up a hand. Zev, listen. He closed his mouth. I've spent 3 years building structure, keeping promises, holding it down. They trust what they can see, what shows up every morning. You want to be involved? Start there, but don't expect a key to the house when you haven't knocked on the door properly. I'll take it slow, he said. I'll earn it. She looked at him for a long time, her eyes narrowing as if searching for cracks in his resolve. They ask about you now, she said. He sat up straighter. They do? Not by name, she clarified. They ask why other kids have a daddy and they don't. Malachi tells people his dad is a superhero who's away saving people. Leilan just shrugs and says her mama gives the best hugs. Zev blinked, his heart breaking in fresh places. Sheila reached into her bag and pulled out 2 small water bottles. She offered one to each child as they stirred. Then she turned back to Zev. I let them believe what helps them sleep. Zev swallowed hard. Maybe one day, I can be part of that story. Maybe, she replied. But until then. She stood slowly, adjusting Leilan's jacket and picking up Malachi's toy truck from the seat beside her. You don't get to ask more than that. Zev nodded once, eyes shining. She turned and walked away, children in hand, shoulders steady. And for the first time in years, Zev didn't chase. He watched and stayed still. Would you give someone like Zev a second chance? Comment your thoughts below. Your voice matters. The next morning, Zev couldn't think straight. He'd spent the night in his hotel suite pacing, playing out every word Sheila had said in the lounge. He hadn't eaten, couldn't sleep. Her voice kept echoing in his head. You don't get to ask more than that. She was right, but still, she hadn't slammed the door. She'd walked away, but not forever. He watched the sun rise over Atlanta's skyline through the glass windows. Somewhere in this city, his children were waking up. He had missed 3 years already. He wasn't going to waste another minute. At 10:34 a.m., he tapped out a text. Zev, if you'd be open to it, I'd like to see you. Zev, just dinner. Zev, nothing fancy, no pressure, no expectations. He stared at the blinking cursor, thumb hovering, then added, Zev, a chance to talk. That's all. He hit send. No reply for hours. By late afternoon, he started convincing himself she wouldn't respond. He'd pushed too far, asked too much. Maybe she was done. Then his phone buzzed. Sheila, one dinner. No seduction, no promises. I pick the place. Zev exhaled so hard he nearly laughed. He typed back. Agreed. Any dress code? Sheila, don't bring a suit. Don't bring flowers. Bring honesty. Zev sat back in his chair. He could work with that. At 6:45 p.m., he waited outside the restaurant she had picked, a small, cozy Mediterranean place in Midtown, the kind of spot only locals knew. Intimate, but not romantic. Quiet, with low lighting and a clean smell of lemon and grilled garlic. At exactly 7 p.m., she stepped out of a rideshare and walked toward him. Zev froze. No heels, no dramatic entrance. Just Sheila, jeans, a soft burgundy blouse, hair pulled into a neat bun, and a face free of makeup. She looked more like herself than she ever had. He opened the door for her. Hi, he said, voice careful. She gave a small nod. Hi, you look. Don't. He caught himself. Right. No flowers, no compliments. She cracked the smallest smile. You remembered. Inside, they took a corner table. Not too tucked away, not too exposed. Menus were handed out. Orders were placed. But the air between them? That was still undecided. Zev tried again. Thanks for coming. She took a sip of water. It's not a date. I know. It's not a chance to fix everything. I know that too. Good. He nodded. Then it's just dinner. Dinner, she confirmed. Their food arrived a few minutes later, but neither of them touched it. They were too full of history to eat, and too unsure to let it go to waste. The waiter placed their plates on the table with quiet efficiency. Zev ordered grilled salmon with rice. Sheila chose lentil soup and a side of pita bread. Neither touched their food right away. Sheila stirred her spoon through the soup slowly, as if trying to decide if she was hungry enough for this moment, hungry enough for this conversation. Zev leaned back slightly, giving her space. "I didn't come here to start something again," she said plainly, eyes on her bowl. "I know. I'm not here to flirt, or forgive, or pretend like we're picking up where we left off." "You don't owe me that," he said, tone quiet. She looked up. "I just need to say it clearly. You have every right to." A small silence passed. "I said yes to dinner," she went on, "because I'm not angry anymore." That surprised him. "I was," she admitted. "For a long time. Furious, really. Not just at you. At everything. Life, timing, God, myself. But it passed, because anger takes too much energy when you've got two toddlers asking why the sky is blue and why their macaroni is shaped like dinosaurs." Zev smiled faintly. "They ask that? They ask everything." Another pause. But this one felt different. Softer. Still guarded, but not as cold. "I'm not here to pick a fight," she added. "But I'm also not here to fall for old tricks." Zev shook his head. "I didn't come with any tricks. I don't need a performance," she said. "I don't want flowers and grand speeches. I don't want nostalgia. I want clarity. That's it. You'll get that." She studied him for a second, skeptical. "I mean it," he added. Sheila leaned back in her chair. "I don't believe in second chances, Zev." "I don't either," he replied. "I believe in what comes after the first one gets ruined." That made her pause. "I'm not asking for a relationship," he clarified. "I'm asking for time, presence. I want to know them. I want to know you now, not the you I remember, the you I left behind." She didn't speak right away. Then she reached for her water, took a slow sip, and set it down. "You've missed a lot," she said finally. "I'm not trying to catch up overnight." She nodded. "Good." Zev tilted his head. "So, are we okay?" She hesitated. "We're not at war. I'll take that. But this isn't romance," she repeated. "This isn't a reunion story. Don't mistake dinner for anything deeper." Zev raised his hands slightly in surrender. "No assumptions." She gave a small nod, as if to say, "We'll see." And then, for the first time that night, she picked up her spoon and started to eat. The rain had started lightly by the time they stepped out of the restaurant. Zev reached to open the passenger door of her rideshare, but she gently waved him off. "I'm not fragile," she said. Dinner was enough of a reach. "I wasn't trying to—" "I know," she cut in. "But I meant what I said." Zev nodded, stepping back. Before the driver could pull away, she hesitated. "You said you wanted to know me now." "I do." She held his gaze for a beat, then gave the driver a new address. "Follow behind," she said through the open window. "Don't make it more than what it is." "I won't," he replied. 10 minutes later, he stood in the doorway of her modest third-floor walk-up. The hallway smelled like old paint and floor cleaner. One hallway light flickered above, the kind of detail Zev wouldn't have even noticed before today. Inside, the space was warm. Lived in, a beige couch with a throw blanket. A small wooden bookshelf filled with toddler books and dog-eared paperbacks. A second-hand coffee table, one leg reinforced with stacked playing cards. Stickers peeled slightly from the fridge door, alphabet letters, cartoon animals, a happy birthday magnet. Her world was small, but it was stable. Zev stood just inside, not sure how far he was allowed to step. "Shoes off," Sheila said without looking, setting her keys in a chipped ceramic bowl on the counter. He slipped them off and placed them beside two tiny pairs of sneakers. One blue, one yellow, both Velcro. Sheila tossed her sweater over a chair and walked straight to the kitchen. "There's leftover macaroni in juice boxes if you're hungry." "I'm good." "You sure?" "Leyland swears it's gourmet." He smiled. "I believe her." She moved around the kitchen with ease, grabbed 2 glasses, filled them with water. No wine, no pretense. Zev stepped closer, eyes scanning the fridge. There was a crayon drawing taped near the handle. 4 stick figures. 3 small, 1 tall. The tall one had long hair. "Malachi drew that," she said, noticing his gaze. told me the tall one was a robot. He chuckled. They're expressive. They're everything. Zev didn't respond. His eyes moved next to a calendar pinned beside the sink. Color-coded squares, daycare notes, doctor's appointments, grocery lists, every box filled with something. You don't get much rest, he murmured. She poured water into a plant on the windowsill. Rest is a luxury. Kids are survival. Zev took it in. All of it. The chipped counters, the laundry basket near the hallway, the bottle of children's cough syrup beside the microwave, the bowl of mismatched socks on the table. There was nothing polished about this space, but it was honest, and it was hers. I didn't expect this, he admitted. She turned to him, arms folded. Expect what? That you'd build something so full? Sheila looked around the apartment, then back at him. I had to, she said. No one else was going to do it. The kids were asleep in the next room, and the apartment had gone still. Sheila poured 2 glasses of red wine from a half-empty bottle on the counter. She didn't ask if he wanted any. She simply handed him a glass and took a seat on the couch. Zev followed, careful to leave space between them. He took a sip, then placed his glass on the table. You still drink Merlot? Only on nights when I'm not folding laundry at 10 p.m., she replied, legs crossed, wine balanced in her hand. And even then it has to be cheap. 2-for-1 sale cheap. He smiled faintly. Somehow it still tastes better than what we drank in Spain. Sheila glanced at him sideways. That wasn't wine. That was vinegar. He laughed under his breath. You still finished the glass. I was trying to impress you. Zev tilted his head. You didn't need to. She shrugged. Back then it felt like I did. That settled between them. The old days weren't just romantic. They were confusing. Filled with love, yes, but also with pressure, expectations, dreams that didn't always have a plan behind them. I miss the rooftop in Florence, he said after a pause. She nodded. I still remember the wind there. You wore that sweater that kept slipping off your shoulder. You kept pretending not to notice. Zev smiled. I noticed everything. Silence, stretched. But it wasn't cold. Sheila leaned her head slightly against the back of the couch. I used to replay those memories in my head on nights when both babies cried at once, when I hadn't slept in days, when I felt like nothing was mine anymore. He turned to her slowly. They helped? Sometimes. She took a sip. Sometimes they made it worse. Zev nodded, accepting that. She looked around the room. This place isn't much. I know that it's yours, he said. That makes it more than enough. She raised an eyebrow. You used to live in a 2-bedroom high-rise with concierge service and a fridge that spoke French. He chuckled. And no one waiting for me inside. Their eyes locked again. Longer this time. She looked away first. I don't bring men here. I'm not here for that. Good. Zev picked up his wine again. Do they like cartoons? They're obsessed. Malachi watches the same dinosaur episode 3 times a day. Zev laughed. I used to do that with spaceship shows. Explains the hairline, she teased. He touched his forehead. Wow. Below the belt, Sheila grinned and took another sip. They weren't flirting. Not exactly, but something was softening. Not forced, not fast, just real. He looked at her hands, still elegant, but more callous now. He wondered how often she'd held their kids through fevers or fear. How many nights those fingers had rocked tiny bodies while carrying heartbreak. You okay? She asked, noticing his stare. Yeah, he said quietly. Just remembering what I missed. She didn't respond, but her silence didn't feel like rejection this time. It felt like permission. The wine was half gone now. The air between them was no longer heavy. It had shifted into something quieter. Not quite relaxed, not yet open, but less closed. Sheila got up and walked to the window, pulling the curtain back slightly. The city outside buzzed with late-night life. Headlights, murmurs, distant sirens. You can sit, she said over her shoulder. You don't have to keep standing guard. Zev sank into the couch again, slower this time. It's your space. I'm trying not to take up more than I should. She glanced back, studying him. You used to take up every room you walked into. I used to think I had to. She walked back, barefoot now, the rhythm of her steps softer than before. She sat beside him, this time closer. Close enough that their arms nearly touched. She curled one leg beneath her, and leaned back. "You've changed," she said. "I hope so." He looked at her now. Really looked. The quiet curve of her shoulder, the slight shadows under her eyes, the way her body had shifted, not in beauty, but in truth. She wasn't the woman from Florence anymore. She was something more anchored, more powerful, more hers. "You've changed too," he said. She nodded. "You can't carry twins alone and come out the same." He let the moment stretch. "I don't want to ruin this," he said softly. "Ruin what?" "This peace," he admitted. "This quiet between us." Sheila exhaled. "Then don't." They sat like that for another minute. Just breathing, just being. Her voice came quieter now. "Do you regret it?" "Every day." "The night you left? The years I didn't come back." She looked down at her wine. "You know what I regret?" He turned to her. "I regret believing that love was enough, that feelings alone could build something." Zev leaned closer, not touching her. "I don't want to offer feelings this time. I want to offer presence." She looked at him, her expression unreadable. He didn't reach for her hand, didn't close the space, but his voice dipped. "If I leaned in right now, would you pull away?" Sheila's jaw tightened slightly. She didn't answer. He didn't move. "You still wear the perfume I bought you," he said. She nodded once. "And your daughter told you it smells like home." Her throat worked, but she said nothing. Zev whispered, "Say stop." She didn't. His fingers brushed hers, barely. Sheila didn't flinch. Instead, she whispered, "You didn't kiss me tonight." His heart kicked. "No," he said, voice rough, "because I didn't want you to think it was the wine talking." She turned to him slowly, her eyes meeting his. "Then why are you still here?" Zev swallowed. "I couldn't leave without remembering what you felt like in the room." She didn't move back. He leaned in, closer, careful, slow. Their foreheads touched first. No rush, just breath. And the quiet truth that sometimes presence speaks louder than promises. Zev didn't kiss her. Not then. Not even when the space between them had thinned to nothing but breath and heartbeats. His forehead rested gently against hers, his hands still barely brushing her fingers. The air held weight, but not pressure. Desire was there, unspoken, yes. But deeper than that was something more cautious. Respect. He pulled back first. Just an inch. Then another. Sheila opened her eyes, blinking as though waking from something layered. Her face unreadable again, but softer now. Less guarded. Still careful, but not cold. He sat back, reclaiming the space between them, slowly. Not because he wanted to, but because she needed him to. She picked up her wine glass, now nearly empty, and took one last sip before placing it firmly on the table. Her eyes stayed fixed on the glass for a few seconds longer than necessary. "You're not staying the night," she said. Zev nodded. "I know. I didn't ask you to come here for that." "You didn't." She pulled her knees up onto the couch, wrapping her arms around them. The apartment had grown quieter somehow, the silence no longer filled with tension, but thought. "You didn't kiss me tonight," she said, her voice calm. Zev looked at her carefully. "No. I didn't." "Why?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Because I didn't want you to think I was trying to reset us with one touch, or shortcut everything you've survived." Her eyebrows raised slightly. "That sounds rehearsed." "It's not," he said. "I've had 3 years to imagine what seeing you again would feel like. But this, being here with you in your space near our kids, it's not something I ever want to mess up." She shifted. "You think kissing me would mess it up?" "No," he said honestly. "I think rushing you would." That landed somewhere real. She glanced at the bedroom door down the hall. "They'll be up by 6. I'll be gone by 5. She smirked a little. "You always were an early riser." Zev smiled too. "You used to steal my coffee before I could drink it. You always used to make it too bitter. It was strong." "It was a punishment," she corrected. They laughed, quietly, but together this time. He stood slowly. "I should go." She didn't stop him. He grabbed his shoes from the door, slipping them on one at a time. Before he could open the door, her voice stopped him. "Zev." He turned. She looked at him across the short distance, the light casting soft shadows on her face. "I didn't expect you to stay," she said, "but I didn't expect you to leave without trying either." He stepped forward, a little closer. If I try, I want it to mean something. Her voice came lower. Then make sure it does. He nodded. I'll see you again. She gave a small shrug. Maybe. That was more than he'd hoped for. He left without touching her again. But his name lingered in the room long after the door closed. It started with breath, not a kiss, not a sudden pull, just breath, shared and shallow between them, hovering in that narrow space where hesitation turns into decision. Zev's hand touched her waist first, open palm. No pressure, just placement. A simple confirmation that she was real and present and right here. Sheila's eyes didn't close, not yet. She watched him. She wanted to know if he'd flinch, if he'd rush, if he'd treat her like a checkpoint instead of a person. He didn't. He moved slowly, one hand on her waist, the other lifting to cradle the back of her head, fingers slipping gently into her curls. She let out a breath, low and shaky. And then their mouths met. It wasn't like before. This wasn't youthful urgency or fantasy-driven hunger. This was something else, deeper, weightier, laced with years of what-ifs and almosts. Zev kissed her like he was trying to memorize her again, not conquer her. Like he knew her body wasn't the same, but loved that it wasn't. She melted into him, hands sliding up his chest, feeling the warmth of him under his cotton shirt. Her fingers curled near his collarbone as if trying to hold on to something solid while everything inside her trembled. Their kiss deepened. Her lips parted. His hand moved to the small of her back, steadying her. She shifted her knees, letting her legs slide against his. The couch felt too small now, too limiting, too confining for the way their bodies were slowly rediscovering one another. Still, Zev pulled back for just a breath. You okay? He asked, forehead against hers. She nodded, voice low. I just don't go fast. I'm not here for fast, he whispered. I'm here for real. That did something to her. She reached for the hem of her blouse, pausing. He stopped her. I'll do it. She let him. His fingers were careful, respectful. He pulled the fabric over her head, revealing stretch marks and skin that had carried 2 lives and carried her through seasons she thought would break her. He didn't look away. His eyes didn't trail with lust, but with awe. She felt it in her chest, the kind of gaze that didn't flatter or flatter. It saw. He kissed the spot just beneath her shoulder. She gasped quietly. His hands moved to her back, then her hips, then to her thighs. When he lifted her into his lap, her breath caught. Her legs wrapped around him instinctively, like memory and longing had fused into muscle. And when his mouth moved to her collarbone, she whispered his name, not because she was overwhelmed, but because she wanted to anchor the moment in something true. Zev. He kissed the edge of her jaw, voice trembling. I should have been there. She held his face. You're here, now. They didn't rush. Their bodies moved slowly, not out of hesitation but intention. There was no need to prove anything. This wasn't about performance. It wasn't about picking up where they left off. It was about learning each other all over again, with the weight of years, with the truth of absence, and with the reality of who they had become. Zev laid her gently on the couch, careful to avoid the small pile of folded laundry on the edge. It made her smile, even now. Her world was full of reality, and he was entering it for the first time without pretending it wasn't messy. He hovered over her, eyes scanning every inch of her face. She didn't turn away. She didn't hide the faint lines or the tiny scar under her eye she'd gotten opening a jar when pregnant. His hand grazed her ribs, then the curve of her hip. She shivered, not from cold, but from the quiet shock of being touched with reverence. Zev pressed his lips to her collarbone, then her shoulder, then down the center of her chest. His fingers slid under the band of her bra. She reached back to unhook it, slow, without shame. When it came off, she didn't cover herself. She let him see all of her. Her softness, her stretch marks, the faded line down her belly from pregnancy. He didn't flinch. He touched her like every mark was sacred. You still feel like home, he whispered. She exhaled, shaky but grounded. You still make me nervous. His forehead rested against her shoulder. I'm trying not to. It's not a bad thing, she murmured. It means this matters. He looked at her again, eyes glassy, mouth trembling slightly. Then he kissed her, deep and sure. Their hips moved together, slowly, like a rhythm remembered after years of silence. She traced the muscles of his back, feeling how his body had changed too. Broader, more solid, yet still familiar. He pressed his forehead to hers, letting their breaths tangle between them. Her thighs gripped his waist. His hands slid beneath her, supporting her, lifting her closer. There were no loud moans, no dramatic gasps, just quiet, intentional. They held eye contact the entire time, like blinking might cause the moment to slip. Each touch was a question, each kiss an answer. She pulled him closer, her voice barely a whisper. "Don't disappear. Never again," he promised, his voice breaking. When she arched against him and whispered his name again, this time softer, more sure, he held her tighter. Not possessively, protectively, because for the first time in years she was letting someone hold her, not just her body but her story. And he didn't drop a single piece. Afterward, neither of them spoke for a long moment. They lay on the couch, limbs tangled, the soft whir of the ceiling fan humming above them. The lamp cast a warm glow over the room, highlighting the quiet details of a life Zev hadn't seen until now. Board books stacked in a basket, a forgotten pacifier under the table, a baby monitor plugged in beside the couch. Sheila rested her head against his chest, her fingertips drawing slow, absent-minded circles on his skin. Zev broke the silence first. "I was scared," he said quietly. "That day in Florence, after the hospital, I didn't know how to come back to you." She didn't move, but her hand stilled. "I thought maybe I wasn't the man you deserved anymore," he continued, "and that if I showed up too late, I'd do more harm than good." She drew in a breath. "You were too late, I know. But I still needed you," she whispered. Zev closed his eyes. "I hate that I wasn't there." "You don't get to hate it," she said softly. "You weren't the one carrying life alone." "I know that now." Her voice dipped. "There were nights I'd stare at the ceiling, wondering what I did wrong. Why the man who said he'd love me forever didn't fight for me." He tightened his arm around her waist. "I thought I did," he said. "Back then, trying to keep my father alive, trying to keep my business from collapsing while sitting in hospital rooms. It felt like fighting, but it wasn't fighting for you." "No," she agreed. "It wasn't." She lifted her head slightly to meet his eyes. "You disappeared, not because you didn't love me, but because you didn't know how to love me through pain, through mine and yours." Zev blinked slowly. "That's fair." She nodded once, and I stopped waiting. "I had to. I don't blame you." She leaned back into his chest. "When Malachi got his first fever, I sat on the bathroom floor with him wrapped in a towel, praying it would break. I didn't sleep for 2 days. I kept wishing someone would knock on the door and say, 'You're not doing this alone.' But no one ever knocked." Zev closed his eyes again. "I'm sorry." Her next words came slower. "I stopped needing the apology after a while, but I never stopped needing to say that." He kissed her forehead. "Light, reverent, thank you for saying it." She swallowed. "You broke something in me. I know. But you didn't shatter it." He lifted her hand to his lips. "What's left, I'll protect." She looked up. "Even the parts that don't want you yet?" "Especially those," he said. Their eyes held each other again. Nothing flashy, nothing perfect, just two people, bruised and bare, letting the truth exist between them. And for the first time in a long time, Sheila didn't flinch from being seen. Sheila had forgotten what it felt like to be looked at without expectation. Most of her days were filled with doing, making breakfast, packing snacks, folding laundry, teaching, wiping faces, listening to crying without letting her own start. So when Zev held her, not like a prize, not like a memory, but like a person, it startled something awake in her. She lay against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, and let herself breathe in a way she hadn't in years. "You're quiet," Zev whispered, brushing a strand of hair off her face. She nodded. "I'm thinking about whether I believe this is real." Zev didn't respond right away. "It is. That's easy to say in the dark," she replied, voice barely above a whisper. "Everything sounds more promising at night." He shifted slightly so she faced him. "Then I'll say it again in the morning." She looked at him. "You think words fix everything?" "No," he said. "But silence broke a lot between us. Maybe saying things is how I start rebuilding." Sheila studied him. Not the boy she once loved. The man in front of her now. He had creases near his eyes she didn't remember. a scar along his forearm, slight calluses on his fingers from writing or working, she didn't know, but it grounded her to something real. "I don't wear makeup anymore," she said suddenly. Zev blinked. "Okay, I used to. You liked it. I liked you." She let that sink in. "My body's different," she added. "I've carried life. Things don't sit where they used to. I have stretch marks, loose skin. My hips ache when I stand too long." Zev reached for her hand. "You carried our life." Tears built in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "I hated mirrors for a long time," she whispered. "Not because I thought I was ugly, but because I didn't recognize myself. I was just a shell doing what needed to be done." He kissed the inside of her palm. "You're not a shell. I'm learning that again." Her voice trembled. "Tonight, I felt like a woman again. Not a mom, not a task list, just a woman." "You are," Zev said. "You never stopped being one. You just stopped being seen." She nodded, her throat tight. He continued, "I don't want to worship a version of you I used to know. I want to learn who you are now, where it hurts, where you're healing, where you're stronger." She blinked fast. "That scares me." He pulled her closer. "It scares me too. But you're still here." "I am." And for once, she didn't shrink or hide. She laid her head back on his chest, her arm across his waist, and let him feel the weight of her, the real her. Not the dream girl, not the vanished memory, the woman who had survived without him, and now was daring to be seen again. Zev didn't move. He didn't rush to fix what couldn't be undone. Instead, he held her, steady, warm, quiet. Sheila rested in his arms, letting herself feel the rhythm of his breathing against her back. It was slow, anchored. For once, she wasn't the only thing holding the weight between them. He broke the silence first. "I've apologized a lot tonight." She didn't reply. "But I've been thinking," he said, voice low. "Maybe I've used sorry as a shield. Because if I say it enough, maybe you won't notice how scared I am of showing up." Now she turned slightly, just enough to look him in the face. "I don't want more apologies," she said. "I want something I can see, touch, count on." Zev nodded. "I know." He sat up a little, brushing her curls gently back. His hand rested on her shoulder. "Presence isn't poetic," he said. "It's grocery runs. It's walking to the pharmacy in the rain. It's holding your kid's hand while they scream in a waiting room." Her lips parted slightly. "I don't want to stand on the sidelines of your life," he continued. "I want to be in it. If you'll let me." "You make it sound simple." "It's not," he said. "But it's not complicated either. You just have to decide if you can open the door. And I have to decide to stay at the door whether it opens or not." She blinked, processing that. "I want to be at the parent-teacher meetings," he added. "At dentist appointments, at bedtime. I want to be the one who knows their allergies and their favorite cup. You remember things like that?" She asked quietly. "I do now." She smiled faintly. "I'm not asking for a title," he said. "Not yet. I just want permission to show up." She nodded once. "Words don't impress me anymore." "Then I'll stop performing," he said, "and start doing." She studied him. "If you disappear again, I won't let you back in." "I won't," he said firmly. "If you choose work over showing up, I won't. If you break their hearts, I'll earn every moment before they let me near one." She let out a shaky breath. "This isn't romance, Zev," she reminded him. "This is life. It's ugly. It's loud. It's tired." "I don't want romance," he said. "I want the noise, the dishes in the sink, the midnight fevers. I want the hard stuff." She stared at him for a beat longer, then leaned forward and rested her forehead against his. He closed his eyes. "I'm not asking you to love me like before," she whispered. "That version of us is gone." "I don't want her," he said. "I want you, the mother, the fighter, the woman who never quit." Her throat worked. He kissed her temple gently. And that kiss wasn't a promise, it was proof. He was here, not with perfection, but with presence. The night grew quieter, and the street noise outside faded to a distant hum. Inside her apartment, only the soft sound of the ceiling fan and the occasional creak of the couch filled the space. They lay together still, fully dressed again now, under a throw blanket Sheila had pulled over them without a word. Not to signal the end of something, but the start of something quieter. Zev's arm rested beneath her head, her palm pressed flat on his chest, rising and falling with his breath. Her eyes were open, not heavy with sleep, but heavy with thought. She hadn't expected tonight to end like this. She hadn't expected her heart to soften or her guard to lower. But here she was, wrapped in arms she once knew, wrapped in silence she no longer feared. Zev traced lazy circles along her back, not suggestive, just present. Present in a way that made her chest ache, not with longing, but with unfamiliar comfort. He didn't speak, and that was what made it different. He was the man who used to fill every pause with words, with plans, with dreams. But now he let the stillness say what needed saying. Sheila lifted her head just slightly, her cheek brushing his shoulder. "You're still here," she whispered. He turned his face toward her. "I said I wouldn't leave. You said that once before. I didn't mean it then, like I do now." Her throat tightened. "I used to wait for your shadow on the wall," she admitted, voice raw. "Back when I was pregnant. Back when I couldn't sleep and I wanted to believe you'd walk back through the door." Zev's eyes closed. "I'm sorry. I don't need another apology tonight," she said softly. "What do you need?" She looked at him. "This. Just that. Not fireworks. Not grand declarations. Just this moment. Someone beside her. Still. Breathing. Listening. Not running." Zev shifted closer, wrapping an arm around her waist, pulling her against his chest, like he never wanted her to float too far again. "I'm scared," she confessed. "So am I," he replied. "But I'd rather be scared here with you than sure anywhere else." She nodded, her eyes glistening but dry. He kissed her forehead. "I don't have the perfect plan," he said, "but I know I'm not going to miss another year. I'm not going to miss another birthday or Band-Aid or meltdown or macaroni dinner." She chuckled quietly. "I'm here," he repeated. "Until you tell me to go." Sheila let her head rest against his chest again. Let the warmth of his body soothe her doubts. Let the sound of his heartbeat convince her of something she wasn't ready to say out loud yet. Not love, not forgiveness, but belief. That maybe he meant it this time. She exhaled deeply and whispered again, "You're still here." He kissed the top of her head and replied with no hesitation, "Always." Morning light crept in through the window blinds, stretching across the floor in soft lines. The apartment smelled like fabric softener and toast. Somewhere in the hallway, a cartoon jingle played faintly from a tablet. Sheila stirred first. Zev was still next to her, still warm, still breathing beside her, still here. She blinked slowly and lifted her head just enough to look at him. His eyes were closed, mouth slightly parted. One arm rested beneath her, the other sprawled lazily across his chest. She sat up quietly, pulling the blanket off her shoulders and walking softly toward the kitchen. Moments later, a cabinet closed too loudly. Zev woke with a start. His first instinct was to reach for his phone, check the time, check the world. But then he saw the couch, the blanket, the soft noise of eggs cracking in a pan. And he remembered. He pulled himself upright, combed his fingers through his hair, and followed the scent into the kitchen. Sheila stood at the stove in an oversized shirt, hers, not his, barefoot flipping pancakes with a calmness that surprised him. He leaned against the doorframe. "You cook?" She didn't turn. "I survive. Smells good. Don't push your luck." He smiled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Can I help?" She motioned with the spatula. "Plates, top cabinet, but not the blue one with the crack." Zev stepped in, familiar with kitchens, but not this one. Still, he found the plates, set two on the table, grabbed forks without being asked. "Mama, who's that?" They both turned. Malachi stood in the hallway in footy pajamas, hair a wild halo of morning curls, clutching a stuffed dog with one hand. Zev's heart thumped. Sheila spoke first. "That's Zev. He's a friend." Malachi stared at him, then at the plates, then at his mother. Zev bent slightly, eye level with the boy. "You like pancakes?" Malachi looked him over, as if checking for clues. Then nodded. "Good," Zev said. "So do I." Malachi shuffled closer, but stayed near Sheila's leg. Leylan toddled in behind him, her thumb in her mouth and her curls in disarray. Sheila handed them each a cup of juice. "Sit." They did, like it was muscle memory. Zev took the chair beside them, not too close, not trying to wedge himself into a seat he hadn't earned. He watched Sheila slice bananas and arrange them on the table without fanfare. She moved through the kitchen like she'd done it 1,000 times, and she had. He didn't say thank you for breakfast. He didn't overpraise the food. He just ate quietly with them, watched how Leilani dipped her pancakes in juice, how Malachi demanded syrup in a straight line, not a circle. Sheila didn't smile much that morning, but she didn't ask him to leave either. And that was enough. After breakfast, Sheila rinsed dishes while the kids ran circles around the couch, giggling about nothing and everything. Zev offered to help, reaching for the drying cloth, but she shook her head. "I've got it. You don't have to." She kept her back to him. "I know, but I'm used to doing it myself." He stood there for a second, cloth still in hand, then quietly placed it back on the hook. Later, as Malachi spilled juice for the second time that morning, Zev reached for the roll of paper towels before Sheila could move. He cleaned the table, crouched beside the chair, and gently wiped the sticky trail without a word. She watched him, but didn't say anything. When he finished, he looked up. "You okay?" "I'm watching." "Watching what?" "To see if this lasts more than one morning." Zev paused, then nodded. "Fair." The day moved slowly. The kids changed into fresh clothes, cartoon t-shirts, and mismatched socks. Sheila combed Leilani's hair at the edge of the couch, while Malachi struggled with his shoelaces. Zev knelt beside him. "Want help?" Malachi nodded cautiously. Zev tied the sneakers, not too tight. Double loop, no show-off moves. Sheila caught that. They stepped outside for a walk to the corner park. It wasn't fancy, just 2 swings and a slide, but the kids loved it. Zev stayed close, not hovering, just present. When Leilani climbed too high, he stepped in quietly. When Malachi scraped his knee on the gravel, Zev offered his hand and wiped the dirt off without panic. Sheila sat on the bench, arms crossed, watching all of it. "You don't have to pretend," she said when Zev joined her again. "I'm not pretending. You're trying." "Yeah," he admitted, "because I want to be here." She looked ahead. "They don't need magic. They need consistent. I can be that." She turned to him, skeptical. "You say that now. I say it because I mean it. You also said you'd never leave Florence." He swallowed that without defense. "I'm not the same person," he said quietly. "And I'm not the same woman." They sat in silence for a minute as Malachi shouted from the slide, "Mama, look!" She waved. "I see you, baby." Zev's eyes softened. "I want to show up," he said, "in small ways, daily ways. Then do it." "I will, but don't expect fanfare." "I don't want fanfare. I want responsibility." She met his eyes, and for a moment there was nothing between them but truth. "I've carried this family by myself for 3 years, she said. "You don't get to come in and carry it like a prize." "I don't see them as a prize," he said. "I see them as my family." She looked away. "We'll see." Zev didn't argue. He just stood when Leilani called out for help on the swings, and answered, without waiting for permission. The next few days didn't shift like a miracle. They shifted like habits being rearranged, slow, awkward, intentional. Zev stayed in town. He didn't text every hour. He didn't ask to sleep over. He didn't play the hero. He showed up in the small ways. The first Monday morning, he was waiting downstairs in his car when Sheila walked the kids out, bags on her shoulders, hair pulled back in a quick bun. She paused at the sidewalk, squinting. "What are you doing here? Daycare drop-off?" "I didn't ask for help." "You didn't have to." "I figured I'd carry the diaper bag while you hold the coffee." She stared at him. He stepped out, popped the trunk, and took the bags from her without waiting for approval. Leilani clapped. "We go with him?" Sheila's tone stayed flat. "He's walking with us, not driving." "Copy that," Zev said. Each morning, he showed up again. Sometimes with muffins. Sometimes with Band-Aids for scraped knees. Always with intention. At night, when she called the kids in for dinner, he stayed behind to pick up the scattered toys in the front yard. When she ran out of wipes or rice, he restocked without fanfare. One evening, she found him sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, helping Malachi with a letter puzzle. "That's a W," Zev said, pointing. "No, that's 2 verses kissing." Malachi replied with a grin. Zev laughed, genuine and loud. "Fair point." Sheila watched from the kitchen doorway, arms crossed. This man had once vanished from her life without warning. Now he was reading bedtime books with voices, changing into sweatpants after dinner like he'd been doing it for years. Still, she kept her distance. She needed to know this wasn't performance, that this version of him wasn't tied to guilt or longing or nostalgia. One afternoon, she caught him folding laundry. Badly. "You don't fold fitted sheets like that." "I wasn't trying to win awards." "That looks like a towel with anxiety." He laughed. "Teach me." She stepped in, reluctantly, guiding his hands. He paid attention, asked questions, didn't act like a man who was doing her a favor. He acted like a man trying to be useful, and slowly her days began to stretch around his presence. Not in a way that erased the past, but in a way that acknowledged it had company now. She watched as Leilon reached for his hand during their walk home, watched how Malachi pointed at the playground and said, "Zev, push me higher." Watched Zev rise from the park bench and walk over without looking at her for approval. He wasn't trying to charm her anymore. He was earning something steadier. And for the first time, Sheila wasn't waiting for him to disappear. She was waiting to see if he'd stay. And so far, he was. Quietly, steadily. One dish, one ride, one bedtime at a time. Sheila's flower shop sat on the corner of a quiet block. Small, sun-warmed, always smelling like lavender and cut stems. A handwritten sign on the door read, "Sheila's Blooms, grown with grace, wrapped with grit." Zev showed up on a Thursday, sleeves rolled, no questions asked. "I can sweep," he said. "Maybe stock the cooler." She looked up from the counter. "You know how to trim stems at an angle?" "Teach me." And she did. Each morning, after daycare drop-off, Zev met her at the shop. He swept up leaves, cleaned vases, broke down cardboard boxes. He learned which blooms lasted longer out of water, learned the difference between ranunculus and peonies. Customers came and went, and Zev never overstepped. When someone called about a wedding arrangement, he stepped outside to give her space. But she noticed how he peeked through the window when Malachi's drawing fell off the counter, and how he taped it back up without saying a word. At night, the shop grew quiet. Sometimes, after the kids had been picked up, Sheila stayed behind to do the books. Zev stayed too, folding used ribbons or wiping the glass fridge doors. One evening, he brought tacos from the truck down the block. "You eat these? They're $2 and keep me full till bedtime." They ate on upturned crates behind the counter. Leilon wandered over mid-bite, her tiny hands reaching for his plate. "You want a bite?" Zev asked. She nodded. He fed her gently, careful not to let the sauce drip on her shirt. Sheila watched from across the room. Back at home, bedtime became a shared rhythm. He didn't take over. He simply joined. He filled cups of water, turned down bedsheets, and let Leilon fall, asleep on his chest while Malachi insisted on just one more page. He read slowly, gave voices to each character, let Malachi correct him when he skipped lines. Sometimes, Sheila stood at the doorway, arms folded, listening to the sound of her children's laughter, something softer than it used to be. One night, Malachi spilled juice on the kitchen floor. Zev didn't flinch. He grabbed a towel, crouched down, and said, "Next time, we hold the cup with 2 hands. Malachi nodded solemnly, already mimicking his tone. After the kids were tucked in, Sheila stood by the sink, washing dishes. Zev dried them. "You're not trying to impress me, are you?" she asked without looking. "No," he said. "I'm trying to relieve you." She paused. That landed harder than a compliment ever could. Zev looked around the apartment. "I like this life. It's loud. It's messy. It's real." She didn't respond. But the next night, she left the dish towel in his hands without instruction, and he kept showing up, with flowers, with juice boxes, with bedtime voices, with his hands and time and presence. Not because he wanted praise, but because this time he understood what staying looked like. Malachi had never been quick to warm up. Even as a baby, Sheila said, he was the serious one, the one who watched everyone from across the room, who clung tighter when strangers got close, who needed consistency before trust. And Zev knew that. He didn't force affection. He didn't bribe him with toys or sugar. He showed up, quietly, repeatedly. At first, it was small things. Sitting beside him during cartoons without grabbing the remote, helping him find the missing piece of his favorite puzzle without being asked, letting him win at hide and seek, only sometimes. Then, one afternoon in the park, Malachi ran toward the monkey bars and tripped over the base of the slide. Zev saw him fall, hands out, knees scraping gravel. Before Sheila could move, Zev was already kneeling beside him. "Hey, buddy," he said gently. "Breathe for me." Malachi's chest heaved, but he didn't cry. "You okay?" The boy nodded through clenched teeth. Zev took a tissue from his pocket and dabbed the dirt away. "I used to scrape my knees every week when I was your age. Want to know what my mom did?" Malachi sniffled. "She told me if I didn't cry, I'd get extra dessert." That got a smile. Zev winked. "Works every time." Later that night, when Zev came by for dinner, Malachi tugged on his sleeve. "Can you help me with my dinosaurs?" Zev blinked. "Of course." They sat on the floor for nearly an hour, building little cities for the plastic reptiles. Malachi explained each name, gave them voices, assigned them favorite snacks. "This one's Rex. He only eats waffles." Noted. "This one's Trudy. She likes bubbles." Zev played along, no sarcasm, no rush. Sheila stood in the doorway, arms folded, hiding her face behind a cup of tea. By the end of the week, Malachi was asking if Zev was coming back tomorrow. By the next week, he waited at the window, face pressed to the glass. Zev started packing his own Malachi survival kit, a tiny backpack filled with crayons, snacks, and an emergency bandage for scraped elbows. Once, when Zev arrived late after a traffic delay, Malachi met him at the door with folded arms. "You're supposed to be here before the sky goes dark." Zev crouched to his level. "You're right. I'll be earlier next time. No lying." "No lying." Malachi nodded, then hugged him. It was brief, quick, a small body against Zev's chest, but it was real, and Zev didn't move. He didn't speak. He simply held on. Because that hug wasn't permission, it was proof. Proof that trust was forming, slowly, deliberately, and Zev knew better than to take it for granted. That night, Malachi fell asleep in his lap, and Zev didn't dare shift until the boy's breathing settled into rhythm. He looked across the room at Sheila. She didn't say a word, but her expression said everything. "He's watching you. Don't break him." Zev nodded, without needing the words. He wouldn't. Charm used to be Zev's language. Back then, he could soften any moment with a half smile and a joke. He was smooth, polished, the kind of man who knew when to hold your hand and when to step back just enough to make you miss him. But this wasn't that. Not anymore. What Sheila saw now wasn't charisma. It was presence. No grand gestures, no flirty lines. He remembered small things, like how she took her coffee, 2 sugars, no cream. How Leilon hated having her hair brushed. How the flower shop's back door always stuck unless you kicked it from the bottom. He showed up on Tuesdays with extra trash bags when the city skipped collection. On Thursdays, he brought takeout and helped count inventory. On Sundays, he brought the twins back from the park with scraped knees and wide smiles, and never once passed them off like a chore. It wasn't the kind of love you read about in novels. It was sweeping up goldfish crackers without being asked. It was whispering you did good today as she tucked in Leilon. It was calling from the store to ask, "Do we need more apple juice?" Sheila noticed the difference. She noticed the way he didn't touch her unless she leaned in first, the way he didn't speak over her or try to explain away the past, the way he let silence sit between them without filling it with apology. He listened more now, laughed less, but when he did laugh, it reached his eyes. There was no performance, no mask. One night, after closing the flower shop, she watched him stack empty buckets and sweep the petals off the floor. He didn't know she was watching. He wiped his forehead with his sleeve and sighed, not dramatically, just tired and real. Sheila leaned against the doorway and finally said, "You're not trying to impress me." He looked up, startled, broom in hand. "Should I be?" She shook her head. "No, I've had enough of people trying to impress me. They always vanish after the show." Zev walked over slowly. "I'm still here." "I know. You waiting for me to slip?" She didn't flinch. "I'd be stupid not to." He nodded. "Then keep watching." And she did. Not for roses or surprises, but for patterns. He showed up the next morning, and the one after that. He packed extra snacks for Leilon, fixed the jammed sink in the shop, sat through Malachi's second-grade spelling list like it was the Super Bowl. He didn't ask for praise, didn't point out his efforts, and that, more than anything, undid her. Because it meant he wasn't trying to win her back. He was trying to stay. One evening, after closing, he found her sitting in the walk-in cooler, cooling off after a long day. She looked up as he entered. You could have left 100 times by now, she said quietly. He replied, and I didn't. She nodded once, eyes wet. It wasn't trust yet, but it was close. It was raining when she said it. The flower shop had closed early. Thunder rolled in slowly, low and tired. The kids were already asleep, tucked into the twin mattress they often insisted on sharing, limbs tangled like roots. Sheila sat on the floor of her apartment, a blanket draped across her knees, a warm cup of tea in her hands. Zev was nearby, cross-legged, folding the twins' clean laundry. His shirt sleeves were rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms inked with old memories. One sock kept slipping off the pile. He picked it up for the third time, didn't complain. She watched him, quiet. Her gaze wasn't soft. It was cautious. The tea cooled in her hands before she found the words. You know what scares me? He looked up but didn't answer. He'd learned not to interrupt. She set the cup down and pulled the blanket tighter. That you'll leave again, but slower this time. Zev's hands froze on a folded t-shirt. I'm not planning to. I know. Her voice cracked. But nobody plans to, Zev. Life just happens. People disappear. Flights get missed. Phones die. Hearts change. He didn't speak. I lived that, she continued. I lived it with swollen feet, Braxton Hicks, and a midwife telling me to. Breathe while I was still holding onto your name like it was a promise. Zev's jaw tensed. His hands lowered. And now you're here. You're doing everything right. You're good with the kids. You fix things. You show up. She looked him straight in the eye. But I'm still scared. He nodded. Slowly, respectfully. You should be, he replied. I was gone too long. I don't need speeches. You won't get one. She let the silence settle between them. No music, no movie, just the rain outside and the steady rhythm of her own heart trying not to leap. I want to trust this, she whispered. I want to let go of the panic that wakes me up at 2 a.m., thinking the crib is empty. Zev stood, not fast, not slow, and walked over to her. He didn't sit. He knelt, level with her. I don't know how to erase what I did, he said, but I'll live every day showing you that I stayed. Her lip trembled. I'm not asking you to stop being scared, he added. I'm asking you to let me walk with you while you're scared. She didn't cry, not fully, but she reached out, touched his cheek, and in that quiet moment, it wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't closure. It was a beginning. I'm still scared, she said again. He pressed his forehead to hers. Then I'll be brave enough for both of us. It started with the trash. Not declarations, not flowers, not grand gestures. Just trash. The morning after Sheila admitted her fear, Zev took out 3 bags without being asked. One of them leaked slightly, and he cleaned the bin before she noticed. That day, he didn't sleep in or disappear. He stayed close but not clingy, folding laundry, brushing Leilan's curls, mending, a loose button on his own sleeve with awkward but determined fingers. He never asked to move in. He just didn't leave. He helped Malachi match his socks, made pancakes even though the first batch burned. Sheila walked into the kitchen and found him fanning the smoke detector with a towel and laughing softly to himself. Don't fire me, he joked. She didn't smile, but she didn't push him out either. He walked Leilan to daycare while Sheila stayed behind to open the flower shop. He texted her a picture of Leilan holding his hand, grinning up at him, her tiny backpack nearly tipping her over. She's a talker, he wrote. Told me about her invisible puppy named Sir Duke. She stared at the message for a full minute before replying with a single word, thanks. The next morning, he beat her to the shop. He was outside at 6:55 a.m., coffee in hand, fixing the crooked open sign that had been hanging sideways for months. You didn't have to do that, she said, unlocking the front door. I wanted to. He didn't talk much after that. He swept floors, wiped windows, and restocked vases without needing to be told where anything belonged. Every day that followed, he did something, one thing, that proved he paid attention. He bought allergy-free snacks for the kids, picked up extra lavender-scented laundry detergent, found a matching sock that had been missing for weeks. No speeches, no requests, just presence. Sheila noticed. She didn't compliment him, but she started setting out an extra plate at dinner. One night she found a sticky note on the fridge. It read, Malachi prefers the blue spoon, not the green. Zev's handwriting was barely legible, but she kept the note. Every time she turned around, Zev was doing the quiet things, the invisible. Things that men like him usually paid someone else to handle. He didn't post about it, didn't perform for praise. He simply stayed. And slowly, the ache she'd carried alone started to feel less like a weight and more like something shared. Sheila still kept her guard up, but Zev kept showing up, day by day. Small things, real things, the kind that couldn't be faked or fast-tracked. He didn't chase her trust, he earned it. And without even noticing, she'd started waiting for the sound of his knock each morning. The first thing Zev fixed wasn't even broken. It was the old bell above the flower shop door. It had always hung lopsided, ringing off key whenever customers walked in. Sheila had grown used to it. Never bothered her, but one Thursday morning, as she arranged a set of sunflowers by the window, she noticed the sound had changed. Sharper, cleaner. She looked up and saw Zev on a ladder, adjusting the bracket. "Didn't ask you to do that," she said. "You didn't have to," he replied, tightening the last screw. "You flinch every time it squeals." She hadn't realized that. Later that week, he noticed the hallway light in her apartment flickered. Without a word, he picked up a new bulb, replaced the old one, and tossed the box in the recycling bin. That night, when Sheila got up to check on the kids, she paused in the hall, bathed in steady light, and stared at the ceiling longer than necessary. Her bathroom sink had been dripping for months. She'd stuffed towels around the pipe to soak up the slow leak, always telling herself she'd get to it eventually. Zev did. She came home from a grocery run and found him under the sink, shirt rolled up, wrench in hand. "You're not a plumber," she said, leaning in the doorway. "I watched 4 videos and called the hardware guy. I'm at least a certified apprentice now." When he finished, he didn't brag. He just cleaned up, dried the cabinet, and tossed the soggy towels in the laundry. He didn't stop there. The flower shop's register drawer stuck every 4th sale. Zev took it apart one evening after closing. Sheila watched from the back, arms crossed, unsure whether to thank him or stop him. When he blew the dust out of the rails and showed her how it glided smooth again, she said nothing. The next day she told Leland to thank Mr. Zev for fixing Mommy's noisy drawer. Zev blushed. A few mornings later she found him on the floor with Malachi, assembling a plastic drawer for toy storage. The instructions were spread out, and Zev had labeled each piece with sticky notes. "You like building things, huh?" she asked. "I like when things stay where they belong," he replied. He wasn't trying to win her over with repairs. He wasn't trying to make her life perfect. He was trying to lighten her load, bit by bit, without needing credit, and that's what unsettled her the most. How seamless he made himself in a life that once existed entirely without him. The doorknob that used to jiggle, fixed. The bottom shelf at the shop that always leaned to one side, balanced. The broken picture frame in the hallway with the twins' first birthday photo, replaced. Same frame, same size, just sturdier. Zev wasn't asking to be noticed, but she noticed. Every nail, every turn of a wrench was him saying, "You're not alone anymore." It started with a book about bears. Malachi picked it off the shelf during a quiet Sunday afternoon at the shop. Sheila was folding wrapping paper behind the counter when she heard her son's voice. "Mr. Zev, can you read this one?" Zev looked up from the floor where he'd been helping Leland sort flower stickers. He took the book, flipped through a few pages, and settled cross-legged on the rug. "Only if you're ready for the world's worst bear voice," he warned. Malachi's eyes lit up. "Yes." Sheila stayed quiet, watching from a distance as Zev began to read. "Once upon a time there was a bear with a cold, and every time he sneezed, trees fell over." His bear voice was ridiculous, deep, sniffly, overly dramatic. Malachi burst out laughing. Leland giggled, covering her mouth. "You can't sneeze down a tree," she said between laughs. "You've clearly never met this bear," Zev replied, flipping the page. The story took 10 minutes, but Zev stretched it to 25. He gave every animal its own voice, nasal rabbit, sleepy owl, dancing deer. When the bear finally sneezed the entire forest into a feather pillow, both twins were in tears from laughing too hard. "Again," Malachi said, already crawling into Zev's lap. "You want the bear story again?" Zev asked. "No. A new one." Leland picked a book about a princess who grew sunflowers in her backyard. "All right," Zev said, clearing his throat. "This one might require accents." By the time Sheila called it a night, Zev had read 4 stories, done 3 ridiculous impressions, and built a cardboard crown using leftover ribbon from bouquet packaging. Malachi wore it proudly as they packed up to go home. At bedtime, Zev stayed behind. "Can I?" he asked quietly, pointing toward their shared room. Sheila hesitated, then nodded. Inside, Zev tucked them in, one by one. Leylan clutched a stuffed bunny. Malachi insisted the bear book sleep under his pillow. Zev sat beside them, running his fingers through Malachi's curls. "You ever wonder what dreams smell like?" he whispered. Leylan nodded. "Like cookies and crayons." "Like Mommy's hair," Malachi added sleepily. "Good answers," Zev smiled. He didn't rush, didn't perform. He listened when they mumbled about school snacks, nightmares, and toy dinosaurs. He kissed each forehead and stood up slowly. From the hallway, Sheila watched all of it. The man who once vanished without warning now sat beside the two people who reminded him every day of what he almost lost. He didn't just read stories. He became one. The kind of story with laughter tucked into every page. The kind of story two children would grow up remembering not just for how it sounded, but how it felt, safe, warm, whole. And for the first time since Florence, Sheila felt something soften. Not trust, not yet, but the wall inside her had a crack in it now. Because her children were laughing, and Zev was the reason. The shop grew quiet after hours. The hum of the refrigerator in the back, the faint tick of the clock above the window. It was the only sound filling the space between Sheila and Zev as they finished restocking rose bouquets. She reached for a vase. He reached at the same time. Their fingers brushed. She pulled back instantly. "You can finish. I'll go clean up the register." He didn't stop her. But 5 minutes later she came back. Her steps slow, her eyes heavy, watching him as he arranged stems with steady hands. "You handle flowers better than you used to," she said. He glanced up. Turns out, kids and flowers have a lot in common. Both delicate, both need patience. She crossed her arms. "You've changed." "I had to," he said. "Losing you changed me." Her eyes met his, and for a moment neither blinked. "I was angry," she said. "Still am some days. Not just about you disappearing, but about how easily you were able to move on." Zev leaned against the counter. "I didn't move on. I moved through it. Badly. I buried myself in work. I traveled. I dated people I didn't care about because I didn't know how to care again." She said nothing. He continued. "But none of it dulled what I felt that day in the airport. One breath of your perfume. One look at those kids and I knew I hadn't healed anything. I just ignored it." Sheila looked away, biting the inside of her cheek. "It's not that easy, Zev. You being here now doesn't erase what I went through." "I know, and I can't forget how it felt waking up alone in Florence, or delivering twins in a hospital where no one asked me if I was okay." "I'm not asking you to forget," he said. "I'm just trying to give you new things to remember." She laughed dryly. "That sounds nice on paper. I'm not writing a speech." "Good, because I hate speeches." He took a step closer, careful not to touch her. "I like watching you work. You move with intention, like you've mastered everything but still stay open." "That's poetic," she said quietly. "No, it's true. You're strong, Sheila. And not in the way people pretend strength looks like. You're strong in the I'll show up for my kids even when I'm exhausted kind of way." She paused. "You see all that now? I always saw it. I just never said it." The tension thickened, not bitter, but charged. Her breath slowed. His eyes lingered. He didn't close the space. He didn't try to kiss her. But the air between them felt like it might spark if either one exhaled too hard. Sheila broke the moment. "Go lock the front door." Zev nodded and walked away. And in that small silence, she let herself wonder, for the first time, if it was possible to feel safe in his presence again. The front door clicked shut. Zev twisted the key, gave it a small tug to be sure it was locked, then turned the sign to closed. Inside, the shop looked different after hours. Dimmer, softer, more intimate. Sheila was sweeping near the cooler, but her hands slowed and her eyes drifted toward him. He didn't speak, just walked past her, quietly lifting a few stray leaves off the counter. Their steps moved around each other like a rhythm they hadn't forgotten, only tucked away. "I always hated closing alone," she said. "Why?" he asked, still not looking directly at her. "Because everything feels louder, like the silence is reminding me I'm the only adult in the house." Zev rested a hand on the counter. "You're not tonight." She set the broom aside and leaned against the wall. Her shoulders relaxed, but her gaze sharpened. "You keep saying all the right things." "I'm not trying to say the right thing," he replied. I'm just trying to say the truth. She sighed. Truth is, I don't know what to do with you. Some nights, I want to slam the door in your face. Other nights, I wish I could rewind. I think about that too, he said. Rewinding, saying the words I choked on, buying a different ticket, not letting you go. You didn't let me go. You left me behind. That landed. Zev nodded. Yeah. I did. He stepped closer, but not enough to touch. I came back because the idea of them growing up without knowing me crushed me, but I stayed because I realized the idea of you forgetting me scared me more. Her voice wavered. I tried to forget. I really did. He didn't say anything. Silence stretched again, but this time it wasn't tense. It was waiting. She turned, started toward the back room, then stopped. You didn't kiss me that first night. No, you almost did. I waited. Her voice lowered. Are you waiting now? Zev took one step. No. She turned slowly. Their eyes locked. The air shifted. He closed the final space between them, but didn't rush. His hand hovered at her jaw, waiting for her to move first. She didn't, so he kissed her. Soft, slow, sure, like someone returning home after being lost too long. She leaned in, her hand resting on his chest, feeling the beat under his shirt. He kissed her like she wasn't breakable, but still precious. No apologies, no questions, just present. When they finally parted, her eyes didn't close. She whispered, "This doesn't fix everything." I know, he said. It wasn't meant to, but it mattered. He smiled slightly. I'll take that. They stood there, inches apart, the flower shop still and quiet around them. Sheila turned away first. The kiss still hung in the air, but she didn't try to name it or hold it too long. Instead, she walked toward the back of the shop, her fingers brushing past flower stems and folded invoices on the counter. Zev stayed where he was, watching her but giving her space. The room smelled like crushed rose petals and vanilla lotion, the kind she used to carry in her bag when they traveled together. He remembered. She paused near the small shelf where the kids' things always ended up. A lunch bag, a red headband, Malachi's tiny sneakers, scuffed and muddy from the playground. She ran a hand through her curls and sighed. You know how many people said they'd stay? Zev stayed quiet. I had friends, relatives. Even the neighbor across the hall said, "Call me if you need anything." But they all left. Some gently, some without a word. I stopped asking. He took 2 steps forward, his voice soft. I'm not them. I know, she said. You're worse. That hit him like a slap, but she wasn't finished. You had me. You had everything. And you didn't even say goodbye. I didn't know how, he admitted. Her eyes burned into his. You don't get to keep doing that. Showing up and hoping kisses and playdates are enough. I'm not hoping, he said. I'm working, every day, on learning what I ruined and how not to ruin it again. She looked down at the shoes. He moved closer, then crouched and picked them up. His thumbs ran over the Velcro straps. He cried last week when he thought he lost one, said it was his running shoe. She smiled slightly. He thinks he's faster in them. Zev stood and placed them carefully on the shelf, lining them up side by side. I washed them when he spilled orange juice on them, not because I had to, because I wanted to. Sheila folded her arms, her voice quiet now. Zev. He turned. I'm still scared. He nodded once. I'd be more worried if you weren't. Silence again. Heavy, but not hopeless. She took a deep breath. Then prove it. He didn't flinch, didn't speak, didn't promise. Just nodded again. Then reached down, picked up Malachi's sneakers, and gently tucked them into the small cubby by the counter. No fanfare, no grand gesture, just presence. Sheila didn't smile, but she didn't stop him either. The moment settled like dust in sunlight. No music, no dramatic lines, just the sound of a man finally doing what he should have done years ago, stay. Sheila no longer counted the days since Zev walked back into her life. She didn't need to. Now it was about moments, the ones that made up mornings, playground drop-offs, tantrum diffusions, storybook recitals, and those quiet nights where 2 adults sat on the couch, too tired to talk but comfortable in the silence. Zev had stopped promising. He had stopped apologizing for what he missed. Instead, he built a new rhythm, soft actions that spoke louder than regret. He didn't flinch at responsibility. He didn't beg for approval. He simply showed up. Sheila once measured men by their words. Now she measured them by the weight they carried and didn't complain about. The diapers, the dirty dishes, the daycare calls when Leilon scraped her knee, the cold medicine runs at 2 a.m. Zev passed every test she never gave aloud. What made it real wasn't the kisses or the tender moments. It wasn't how he looked at her or how their bodies fit again after years apart. It was how he folded laundry while she slept in, how he picked her up after closing the shop, how he danced to silly songs with the twins in the kitchen without checking his phone. Every time he stayed when it would have been easier to leave, the past softened. Every time he let her lead, even when it meant swallowing his pride, her guard lowered. Every time he remembered the small details, like how Malachi hated crusts or how Sheila couldn't fall asleep without the window cracked, trust took another breath. No fireworks, no speeches, just the steady beat of trying. Sheila had grown too. She wasn't the scared girl in Florence. She was a mother, a woman who'd survived heartbreak, loneliness, and labor. She didn't fall in love easily anymore, but she believed in effort. And Zev, he didn't chase forgiveness. He earned trust day by day, mess by mess. Sometimes love doesn't return with noise. Sometimes it knocks quietly, puts on an apron, and helps clean up the life it once left behind. Zev had once planned to propose with champagne and string lights, a rooftop dinner, a band, a speech, but in the end, it wasn't grand gestures that brought Sheila back to trusting him. It was the quiet things, like how he never corrected her when she was too tired to finish a sentence, or when he showed up late to work because he didn't want Leilon to cry on her first day of pre-K. He learned to blend into her rhythm without demanding she slow down for him. He started showing up at the flower shop at noon with lunch. He kept a pair of tiny sneakers in his car, just in case. Sheila started to notice she wasn't doing everything alone anymore. Love wasn't about swooping in and fixing broken pieces. It was about staying through the boring, repetitive, ordinary things, and still choosing each other when nobody else is watching. She had once begged for presents from a man who never stayed, and now, without asking, she had it. Love isn't loud. Love is reliable. Love is seeing the same face at the end of the day and knowing it'll still be there tomorrow. Zev didn't charm his way back into Sheila's life. He didn't sweet-talk her into forgetting the past. He learned that presence is louder than apology. It's easy to buy roses. It's harder to clean up after tantrums, show up for dentist appointments, and remember the grocery list without being asked. Sheila didn't need charm. She needed to know that when she was tired, he'd notice. That when the bills piled up, he'd sit with her to figure it out. That when the kids were sick, she wouldn't be alone. And that's what he gave her. A quiet kind of love. Solid. Real. She watched him one evening, crouched on the floor, coloring with Malachi. Leilon on his shoulders. A storybook open, his voice calm. That's when she knew. He was here. Finally. Fully. The man who missed the flight in Florence was no longer running. The man on her rug wasn't perfect, but he was present, and that made all the difference. Tap like if this story reminded you that second chances are earned, not owed. Share this with someone who needs to hear that love takes work. Comment below, have you ever tried again with someone who once let you down? Was it worth it? And don't forget to subscribe to Mr. Peterson Long Stories. We bring you stories that stay with you long after the screen fades. Because love, family, and healing, they're not just stories, they're life.